Good evening to all of you. Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Dr. Preeti Shanbhat. I'm the Academic Director of Manasa Education Foundation for Mental Health. First of all, welcome to MEFFMH and thank you for joining this course. Today, my first class would be on basics of counseling. And the reason why we would want this class to be held is because a lot of you who have come into this course are not from the background of counseling. You have taken up different graduations, are working in different areas of work. And therefore, once you start with a counseling course, which is provided on a distance education basis, I think we need to start the course on a particular mindset, which is important for all of us to start with. Now, the first thing which I need to tell you is that before we delve into the actual field of counseling, there are a lot of myths that we need to debunk. There are a lot of facts that we need to know about counseling. And most importantly, we need to understand that counseling is not what we thought was counseling, but definitely there is a science, there is a way behind how counseling should be done. And more importantly, there's a way behind how counseling should not be done. So I think the first introductory class, which was given by Dr. Sandhya Kaveri, our course coordinator, would have explained to you a lot of details about what is going on in this course and what you would be expected to learn over the next 1 year, how you have to submit your assignments, what all self-instruction material is given to you, and how you have to browse through it. Now, my topic or my class for about 40 minutes would be on the practical aspects of counseling, how actually you would feel or what you would experience when you're sitting across a client when you're counseling, and what you should not be doing in that 1 hour or 40 minutes of your counseling session. So, welcome back again, and we start off with the basics of counseling. To start off with, I would like to again formally welcome you into a world which is new, exciting, intriguing, but at the same time, it is actually a very serious profession and occasionally seems difficult when you practice it. Now, I would all want you to take a minute to either think or write down on a piece of paper about what it is that made you want to take up this course. What was your motivation behind taking up this course? What was your idea behind wanting to do counseling or wanting to learn counseling? Now, I consider this a very important question for yourself because whenever we hear the term counseling, now it is in pop culture a very popular term. And we believe that we can do counseling very easily and we fit into the role of counselors because many number of times we have acted as agony aunts to a lot of people who are with us, our friends, our colleagues, our relatives, etc. And a lot of times we would have spoken to them and their problems would have got solved, which is the reason why we would have thought that we may be good at counseling or that we already know and understand much of counseling. Now, I want you to write down this note about why you have taken up this course or keep something in your mind, because at the end of this presentation, when you go back to your question again, probably the thoughts may be better crystallized. You may actually realize why is it that you wanted to take up counseling and what are the things you shouldn't be doing here. So a few things which we usually encounter or when our students tell us would be in this context. One is they feel that counseling is a way to help others and they are well equipped to do so or interested in that particular field. Whether counseling is able to help you with your work. A lot of you are doctors, teachers, engineers, by profession, HR professionals, people working with children in NGOs, people working with a huge set of population, a morbid population as in NGOs and things like that. So most of you think that in your work, if you understand and realize what counseling is, it might help you better your work. Whether counseling is helping to handle your family better, the interpersonal relationship between the family members, etc. Whether you think learning counseling and helping out would make the world a better place. This is also a very noble ideal, wherein a lot of people take up counseling because they want to work as lay counselors, want to work as counselors in NGOs or at grassroots levels, wherein they improve a lot of knowledge base. They help interact with people who have no access to either medical profession or psychiatrists, and therefore definitely do the world a lot of good. Or is it that counseling would actually help you personally to improve upon yourself, for self improvement, for self development? and so that you can understand your person better, and therefore it might lead to a change in your person. Apart from this, is it something else? So think about it for a second and then we move on. Or is it finally, as we humorously put it, that we would like to find, as we are counselors and we know how to solve problems, we try to find problems in places where we do not find. Now, this is one thing exactly which should not be happening. As they've humorously put it, the counselor here is asking the person lying on the couch whether he could at least pretend to have a problem so that the counselor gets the happiness of solving the problem. So, as somebody said, counselors, as you are all going to be, should be where the problem is and act as people who solve the problems rather than creating problems and being by themselves problems to the society. So, this is exactly what this course is about. So, during your lifetime, you might have had experiences in which you were a receiver of help. Recall one such situation where you were in some sort of trouble, either emotional or behavioral, and you had gone to seek solace or help from a person whom you believe can lend it out or hand it out to you. They may be somebody senior, a family member, a friend, a relative, your teacher, anybody whom you consider in high regard. And when you went there, think about that situation and answer these following questions for yourself. Number one, what kind of help were you seeking? There are three reasons why you go to for help. Number one, that you need them to understand what you're going through. Number two, you need a shoulder to cry on, and you will solve the problem yourself, but all that you need is some amount of emotional support. Number three, that you've gone there in search of some solutions and you have a few, but you don't know what you want to take. So you've just gone there to get guided per se, or that you've gone and said that this is what I'm facing, kindly give me a solution. So, what kind of help is it that you were seeking? Second thing, how did this helping person treat you? When you went to that person, was that person very upfront or talking to you very nicely? Were they talking to you with enough amount of respect? Did you feel understood during that point of time that you had gone there and yes, you think that you would get a solution post this talk of 10 or 20 or 30 minutes? What were your concerns and was that other person able to understand them? And were you feeling respected and good throughout the conversation? In the end, remember, after coming out of the session, what were the memorable characteristics of that person who was talking to you? You may or may not have got a solution for your problem, but at least try and remember that what parts of that conversation made you feel comfortable. Was it the level of comfort? Was it the kind of advice that you were given? Was it the caring nature of that person? Was it the fact that you were feeling like somebody was listening to you? If you go through these questions and probably get the answers for these, you know what counseling should be and what counseling should not be. In the kind of help that you were seeking, if you had gone for help for one thing and you got help for in some other way, you had gone to be listened to, but the other person just pushed away everything or your concerns is trivial and gave you certain answers and said, I do not have time, I think this is what you should do it and get over with it. How would you feel? Second thing, how the helping person treated you. Were they comfortable with you? Did they give you enough time? Did they give you enough trust and respect? So, if all these things were going on well, you would have felt good during and post the counseling session. So, this is exactly what a counselor should be having. The third thing, once you came out, those things which you remembered that, okay, this is what clicked, this is what was good in this person, and this is what made me feel nice or made me get my answers, are those qualities which you are seeking for yourself to become a counselor. So, counseling is, as you all know, a very collaborative process which involves the development of very unique, confidential helping relationship. Now, the process happens very importantly in an atmosphere of acceptance, respect, and trust. And all three of these are very, very important. They are like three legs of a table, wherein even if one is not present, the counseling process will not go on that smoothly. One of the very easily or fast quoted definitions of counseling come via HB English and AC English, who say that it is a relationship in which one person endeavors to help the other to understand and solve his or her adjustment problems. Now, the basic terms which you need to know once you are counseling is one as counseling, which I've already described to you earlier. The second one is a counselor, which you are going to be. The third one is a counselee or a client. Remember, through this course and beyond, do not and please Do not think of your counselee as a patient. Patients are people who are having some sort of mental or physical illness, and they would have come to seek for help from a medical professional. As a counselor, it is left to you to call your client a counselee. And if you discover some mental illness or some kind of morbidity psychiatrically within that person, it would be for you to refer it to a psychiatrist for diagnosis rather than call him or her a patient by themselves. So the person sitting opposite to you needs to be referred as a counselee all the time. And this is a very important practical tip for your practical exams, wherein if you refer to your counselee as a patient, the examiner may not take kindly to it. The last one is a counseling theory, which tells you from different parts of the counseling realm, there are different theories that have been developed by different professionals. Now, these theories give you a basic construct in which you can formulate your counseling process. There are different kinds of counseling theories which you will be getting used to during your contact program, or which you will hear about during your contact program. And when you are trying out your counseling with a client, you may have to pick out a few counseling theories based on which you do the counseling. It is like saying that you have decided to cook a certain dish in your kitchen, and there are some vessels or some instruments which you would pick up, like a whisk, a spatula, a non-stick pot, or whatever it is, to cook a certain kind of dish. Whereas to cook some other kind of dish, you may need a different set of instruments altogether. So the counseling theory is like a recipe from which you pick a certain amount of tools, like all your instruments which you use to make that recipe or turn that recipe into an actual dish. And the dish is what happens in the counseling process or through the counseling process. So I hope it is clear to you. These four terms are the basic terms that you'll be using. Now, a very important thing which you need to differentiate from before you get into this journey of counseling is that you need to understand the basic differences between a few terms which all of us before entering into this field of counseling would have taken for granted. And these three terms are advice, guidance, and counseling. In between the three of them, until and unless you know a difference, you will not become a qualified counselor, or you will not get into the counseling process very validly. So, the first thing is counselor. Who is a counselor? He is a professionally trained person qualified to help others to reach their solutions. Remember that I'm not telling here that he or she is qualified to provide solutions for them. You are not a person sitting across in a grocery store wherein the client comes and asks for something and you just pick and give it to him. You are qualified to help the client find his or her own solutions. You have to be a very uninvolved person. Remember that involvement in a certain level is definitely important, but once that involvement becomes too much, you start getting personally attached to your client, then the counseling you do will cease to be counseling and it will be more of advice giving or guidance. So you need to maintain very professional boundaries between the counselor and the client. We understand that as you have taken up this profession, you are very empathetic people who have come into the profession with an idea that they would want to help others. But remember, there is a point wherein helping others would mean making them crippled and making them not think for themselves. As a counselor, this is the place where you should not be reaching. You need to enable your client to start thinking for himself or herself, start taking responsibility for himself and herself, and start making their own decisions. Therefore, the more uninvolved you are in their emotional turmoil, the better it would be for counseling. I'm saying that, in other words, empathize with their problems, probably sympathize to a certain extent with what is going on with them, but do not solve their problems for them, do not get involved in their personal life, and do not promise the impossible. Say somebody, for an example, somebody comes and tells you you are in financial trouble. Your counseling session should go on the lines of talking about his finances, why he made such wrong decisions, how would he think his finances will improve, what are the areas where he can bank upon to get some money from, how would he plan to return the money back. These are the things that you are ought to be discussing in counseling, rather than saying it, let's see if I can help you out, I'll give you some money, you sort out your financial problems, and then you give it back to me after some time. Now, this does not constitute to counseling. So once you become more and more involved with the client, the chances or the opportunities for such kind of exchange will become higher. You know the client for a while, been seeing him or her for 6, 10, 12 sessions, and then some request comes either by way of money or by way of some social situation. I'm very upset with my mother. Why don't you talk to my mother just like that and make her understand my problem? Why don't you come home and speak to my relatives and explain to them what the problem is? These are requests which go beyond your counseling chamber and which may not be right for you to take. So learn to be as uninvolved as possible emotionally, but be involved, as much involved as possible during the counseling process to help the person find his or her solutions. You as a counselor need to be equipped with a lot of skills and information. Therefore, the counseling theories, and therefore you need to delve into them quite deeply. And you are a person who facilitates change in behavior. Probably all of us in school have learned about catalysts. Those are certain substances which are used to make the reaction happen. You are neither the cause nor the effect, but you are a very important part of why the cause becomes the effect. So this is what the job of a counselor is. Now, going back to what I said, as a counselor, now at the end of this 1 year, you will be a professionally trained person. You will have enough practical skills so that you're qualified to help others reach their solutions. You are learning slowly to be uninvolved. You are facilitating change in behavior. But the next step is that you should know what the difference is between guidance, advice, and counseling. So just let me explain these three terms in brief. Advice giving is probably the first thing in the hierarchy. Now, a lot of times when we go to a person seeking knowledge, I do not know about something. So I go to a person who I think has enough knowledge about that particular thing. And that person tells me that this is exactly what you have to do. Now, to give you a very small example, I would probably say that most of us are not financially well versed. We do not know what to do, and we have not much knowledge of whatever happens either in the financial ministry or anything like that. So, probably when we need to handle our own finances, we go to a professional like a chartered accountant or an accountant and explain that this is what is happening. Kindly tell me what to do. Now, here in this exchange, the person who's going to the chartered accountant or the financial advisor has probably less knowledge about how to handle his finances as compared to the person who has studied about it and who's practicing it on a day-to-day basis. So your financial advisor would definitely know about today's norms, regulations, what taxes are to be put, what not to be put, how you can make best use of your money, which I do not know. So he tells me that I think probably this is the way you need to handle your money. I take that advice, come back home, and I invest my money the way he has. Now, there is a very, very one way exchange in this interaction. I go and ask, he tells me. Now, three things you have to observe in this interaction is one, that he tells me what to do and I come back and follow it. There is not much scope for me to tell him, but I think there is this law, I think there is that law. Can we try it out with this law? For the simple reason that I do not know much about laws and income tax. So it is a one-way thing wherein the person with more knowledge transfers his knowledge to a person with less knowledge in that particular field, number one. The second thing is there is no option giving usually. If something I feel is right for my client, I will tell him that you do this, because then giving too many options becomes too confusing. Say if I am a financial advisor and I tell my client, probably you can keep it in the bank, probably you can put an FD, probably you can make it into a mutual fund, probably you can invest in some bonds, probably you can buy gold. If I give 6 options to my client who has very minimal knowledge about how to handle his finances, that person will be all the more confused than less. Therefore, going by what he knows and what he has, I will immediately tell him that this is probably the best option for you. Please take it. And I follow that advice and go. Another example of such an interaction would be when a physician sees a client. Say somebody has come to him with fever. I check him and I tell him that you need to take Crocin 3 times a day for 5 days. If it does not subside after 5 days, we will go in for a blood test. Now here, the advice is mostly didactic. I know more about fevers than my patient probably. So I tell him that this is the best option. The client is not in a position to argue with me, why 3 times a day? Don't you think that this journal claims that twice a day is enough? So he does not have enough knowledge to talk to me about other options. And usually in day-to-day practice, I do not give them multiple options. Like probably you can take crocin one day, you can take some other painkiller some other day, you can try antibiotics on the third day, see which works for you. This would probably give out an impression that I don't know much about what I'm saying, and probably the client would not come to me next time. So I think I've explained very clearly what advice giving is. It is a one-way process usually, wherein knowledge gets transmitted from somebody who has a higher knowledge to a point of lower knowledge, or to a person who has lower knowledge about that particular thing. Whatever I tell you is a solution and you go and apply it to your life. And this is what advice giving is. Nothing more, nothing less. One step higher in the hierarchy is what we call as guidance. Now, this allows a little more scope or room for conversation, wherein the basic constructs are the same. The person has a little higher level of understanding of one particular subject. Going back to our chartered accountant or our physician, they have good know-how of either medicine or financial laws. But the client coming to them also has some amount of knowledge regarding both. So they come to me and tell me, say, for example, I am a psychiatrist. There is a co-physician. There is another doctor who has finished his MBBS who's coming and talking to me about his or her psychiatric illness. Says that I am very anxious, I'm not getting sleep, I'm not able to eat. So when I talk to this person now, it is not advice giving. It is more of guidance. I tell him, sir, you are a medical professional, you understand these things. I can treat you in three ways. Probably one, by going through only a counseling process. Number two, by giving you medication which are anti-anxiety drugs. And number three, that either and both anti-anxiety drugs as well as counseling can go side by side. Now, I give these three options because I know that as a co-physician, he has enough knowledge about that particular subject and he can make a very informed choice. So he talks about the pros and cons of each process. If I go through counseling, how long will it take? If I take medicines, it will reduce faster, but wouldn't I be addicted to the medicines? Can I go for a combination of both? So he talks to me about all his issues. I talk to him with the knowledge of his past and his future. I know how busy he is, how much time he can give to the counseling process, how much time he would need to get better in. So I talk to him, discuss all these issues with him, give him options, and he chooses from that option. So guidance is one level higher than advice giving, wherein the level of understanding between both the counselor and the participant is at a higher level. There are some options given because the options are very well understood by the client himself or herself, and then an informed choice is reached. Right? So this is guidance. Usually happens, say for example, post CET career guidance, wherein the student has one know-how of what field he should enter, but is slightly confused. So he goes to a career counselor. The counselor gives him two or three options. There is a discussion for a certain amount, and then a decision is reached as to what happens or what the client is going to do. The last step on the hierarchy is what we call as counseling. Now, in counseling, the difference between the first two and the third one is, number one, you need to consider the client who's sitting opposite to you at an equal level. You are not either higher or lower, but definitely both you and the client work from a level of mutual understanding and acceptance. Number one. Number two, you need to understand that the client may have high degree of knowledge in one field, but is not able to come to an emotionally stable state because of a lot of issues which have happened all of a sudden in his life. Usually in counseling, the client who comes to you is a person who is working with good enough efficiency. His mental and physical health is quite on the normal side, but at the same time, somewhere along the way, there is some change in his day-to-day schedule, some sudden thing which occurs which disrupts the day-to-day schedule, some emotional upset from which immediately he is not able to come out of, and that is the time he needs your help for counseling. Say, to give you an example, I was working really well in my life. I was going morning to the work, coming back home in the evening, doing my personal job or whatever, my household chores, whatever, very well. But suddenly one day in between, somebody who is very close to me, say my spouse or my child or whatever, went to school, ended up in an accident, and there is a lot of pressure on me mentally, financially, physically, and I do not know how to handle it. I'm a working professional. I have to go to the hospital and bunk so many days or take so many days of leave from my work, whether that is okay or not. I am a working professional, so I have some commitments at work also, but at the same time, my household commitments are making sure that I'm not able to go for work. Financially, keeping my spouse or my child in the hospital may take a lot out of me. I don't know how to help myself out of it. So, all these things cause stress, due to which they would have come to you. So, they are people who can understand what is happening to them, but they do not know how to solve their problems. So, during the process of counseling, what you would have to offer them is to understand their past and the future. Make sure that you get an answer out of your counselor as to what he thinks is the right way to handle it. Then give some amount of input as to what they are thinking is right or wrong. And finally, help them find their own answer. So there is no place wherein there are a few instances, yes, where you may have to suggest an answer and say that try this out and see what happens. But most of the time, the goal or aim of counseling is for you to gently push or nudge the client in the right direction, on the right road, so that at the end of that, they reach their own solutions. If the road they have taken is not leading them to the right solution, they fall, they falter, bring them back gently and send them on the next road so that they find their solution. So, counseling is a process wherein they fall, they falter, they get up, but in the end, you are just helping them find their own solution rather than giving them a directive as to do this, do that, do something else. Now, if you understood these three, probably going back to my question of why you would want to be a counselor, maybe you have already helped others, maybe you think that you have counseled in your home, in your nearby surroundings. If you consider these three words which I have right now given you, advice giving, guidance, and counseling, you will realize that most of the times what we would have thought that we have counseled would fall within the first two categories, that is advice giving and guidance, and not in the category of counseling. Now, this is exactly what you have to unlearn and relearn through the course of this 1 year. That you, as a counselor, should do very minimal amount of advice and guidance, and much more of what counseling that you will be learning in the next 1 year. Now, as I told you already, who are these people who would come to you as clients? These are people who are troubled but normal, but have problems related to adjustment with their self, with their environment, in the field of education, in the field of their vocation, social issues, personal issues, interpersonal issues, emotional or decision making issues. They would usually come to you voluntarily seeking help. Now, this is a very, very important and valid point that I'm about to make here. A lot of times, when you become counselors, there will be requests from people who are near and dear to you. They know that you have learned counseling already, that you are already into this field, and therefore they would seek your help. Now, most of the time, because of stigma related to mental and psychological illnesses, these people would want to get a few people for counseling without keeping them in the loop. That is what I'm saying is, if somebody comes and tells you that my child needs counseling, his behavior is not what we are expecting at home, and therefore, why do you not pretend to be my friend and come home? You talk to my son or daughter, you understand what their problem is, even without telling him. Why don't you counsel him a bit and make him better? These are requests which come to you very often once you become a counselor, because the person who wants counseling may not be voluntarily accepting counseling. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions that once you come to a counselor, you will be labeled as crazy, that you will be sent to a psychiatrist, that you will be medicated for life, that going to a counselor means that your willpower is very less and therefore you need to take help from somebody to sort your problems. Because of all these myths and misconceptions, there are a lot of people who are hesitant to come to counselors, and their relatives or their close people who know that they need counseling might use any of these ways to get you to counsel them. Understand that these are areas where you need to draw your boundaries. You need to tell them that if you do that, one, counseling may not end in one session and you do not have any excuse to come back there again and talk to the person for the second time. Number two, if you lie and you are sly in your counseling methods, at one point, if the counselee realizes that you've been lying, you lose trust and the counseling process loses validity. And number three, once the client understands the need of counseling and comes to you by himself or herself, the process is usually smooth and results are usually faster. So, from these 3 points of view, you need to convince the relative or the person that counseling is best possible in a professional setting, wherein the counselor and the counselee are sitting across the table with mutual understanding and respect. If this happens, fine. So you tell them to get them, probably with a little bit of push and a little bit of force, and then we will see how it goes, whether the person wants or needs counseling. A lot of times when this happens, also the counselee will be hesitant or resistant to take up counseling. They will come and let you know that I do not want this, but they've forced me and got me. At that point of time, all that you can hope for is to keep them engaged and talk to them till they become okay and they're okay to come for counseling, number one. Or number two, very decently tell the relatives that this person is not willing. I cannot make him willing by force. So once he gets willing, then you bring him. It is not a damage to your ego, or it is not a slight to your ego that a client comes and tells you that I do not need your counseling anymore. So you need to understand that you have to take it in your stride and give away your counseling process or your goals or your advice only if the person sitting across to you wants to take them. You cannot force it on them. Lastly, they come to you for problems which they cannot by themselves cope up with. Say, for example, sexual issues. A lot of times we have a lot of taboo talking about sexual issues to people who are near and dear to us, and hence a lot of such issues do not get spoken about and therefore kept within us, leading to some sort of emotional distress. Now these things cannot be discussed out in the open nor with your family and friends, and therefore they will never get sorted. So therefore when they come to you as counselors, you need to be very, very sensitive. A lot of time these problems do not come out within the first one or two counseling sessions. Say things like sexual abuse, things like physical abuse, things like sexual issues between the couple, marital problems. These are not things which people will speak very easily about. So they come to you for some other problem. Over a period of time, you discover that this problem was caused by something else behind it, which is much more sensitive, much more private. You need to be sensitive enough to pick up on it and help them deal with it. Lastly, remember, these clients are looking for personally satisfying solutions. You cannot pick up a solution or pick up something from a self-development book or a manual and cut and paste it to everybody or generalize it to everybody. Like say somebody comes to you with social phobia. I'm not able to climb up on stage and talk to people or talk to a huge group of people. You cannot tell all people with social phobia that, let's see, you go on the stage 10 times, the 11th time things becomes easy for you. Practice a little bit of relaxation and meditation and things will become easy for you, because this is something which the client already knows, already has tried, and has still not been successful. So just giving solutions or just picking up from somewhere and telling something to the client without understanding his personal background will not amount to counseling. It is advice giving. So you need to understand the client, understand his socio-economic strata, understand his literacy level, understand his problem personally, and then only give him a solution. Say, for example, picking up from a self-help book and giving some solution or giving advice would be like buying a dress from a mall and giving it to your client. But counseling him and helping him out of the problem would be like making a dress by a tailor which fits the client extremely well. There is a huge difference between the two. In the first, yes, you're clothed, but you may not be comfortable in that clothing. But if a dress is tailor made for you, fits you really well, you'll be really comfortable in it and you will be able to use it for a longer period of time. Counseling solutions are like this. If they are cut paste from somewhere, you will take them, you will use them, but you will never be comfortable. But if the solution is meant for that unique client per se, and the solution is unique to that client, the client will be able to use it better, will be more comfortable with it, and he'll be able to use it more often than what you have told and make his life much better. So these are the things which the clients have to understand. The how of counseling. You need to have a very scientific approach to it. It should be done in a professional setting. It is a one-to-one relationship mostly. I have told you already about a professional setting. Even if you are having a counseling center in one corner of your house, that part needs to be very sacrosanct. You cannot give it up for anything else. You cannot sit on the couch or the sofa or in your bedroom and counsel people. Make it a very professional place. All it needs is a table and two chairs probably and some amount of light. So I think you make the place where you do counseling a very professional, a very sacrosanct place where nothing else should be done. Not on the dining table, not at home, not in the bedroom, or not sitting across on a sofa. It's a one-to-one relationship mostly, but in a few instances, like when parents get their children for counseling, when a couple comes for counseling, those are the times where you may have to allow a few more people into the counseling room. Here, you as a counselor also, you need to understand that you have to assist in interpretation of the facts than just accepting the facts. The client may tell you n number of problems. You need to know which to pick and choose. You can't put everything in a basket because you are also likely to be confused. So you pick and choose. Let him or her tell out whatever problems are there. You pick what is very relevant to what problem he has, and from there on, take the counseling process ahead. You also will have to, as I earlier mentioned, follow a certain theory or a group of theories put together so that your counseling process becomes much more scientific and valid. Most of these points which are given in this slide I've already explained to you, so I will not go into it in very much detail again. All that is important in this particular slide, two things. One is you have to understand or learn the skill of listening. Listening is a very, very important aspect of counseling. Listening and observation are two things which will give you a lot more clues in counseling than anything else will give you. Because usually what happens is when we go to a stranger or we go to a person whom we do not know and talk about our problems, there are two ways that this can go. One, because he's a stranger and they do not judge us, we will be extremely free and we'll put out everything that comes to our mind. On the other end of the spectrum, you're always scared that you might be judged. If I tell this particular thing to the counselor may think that I'm bad, I'm not good, I'm such a bad person. And this can cause the client not to come out with everything what he thinks of. So until you observe body language, until you observe what he's saying, the tone of his talk, all these things, if they are not understood, then you might end up losing the thread of conversation or you might not get to the bottom of the problem. So while you're counseling those 20, 30, 40 minutes, you need to give not only your ears, but all your sense organs in trying to understand the problem consciously as well as sometimes subconsciously for you. Say the person is saying that I'm fine, but his eyes are filled with tears. The person is saying that I'm very comfortable, but he's tapping his foot or he's shaking his knees all the time when sitting and talking to you. The person says that he's very happy, but you see that the smile does not reach his eyes. Then you know that what he's saying and what is going on inside him are not one and the same. And these cues are very, very important for a counselor. So your observational skills and your listening skills need to be very well honed, very well developed, and they should be practiced very effectively, number one. Second thing is, when you start counseling, goal setting becomes very important. A lot of times when clients come to you, this sessions go on continuing, and session over session, the client keeps telling you his or her problems without finally coming to the point as to why and how he came to you. Now, if this happens at the end of 10 counseling sessions, you are at point one only and would have made no progress. So within one or two sessions of counseling, you should at least reach a point wherein you know what problem you're helping the client out with and what is the goal of this counseling session. Do not promise the impossible. Now, if a client comes to you and says that I have come to you to improve my productivity in my academics, I've always been getting 60%. Kindly help me as to improve how I study, my mastery over my memory, so that I get 99.9. At this point, probably you would need to explain to the client that you can help him with mastery over the subjects. You can help him with improving of his memory techniques. You can help him with understanding his academics better, but you cannot promise that 99.9%. That depends on the client, how much effort he puts, how much he gets. But you can only promise that you can show the way, you can teach him methods, and you can teach him effective ways to reach his goal. But do not promise the impossible. So these two things I think in this slide are very, very important. Goals of counseling, as I told you, make sure that you give some amount of psychological support, teach them problem solving, decision making, help them in improving personal effectiveness, insight and understanding of their problems, and achievement of positive health. Now, I've given you a slide where counseling benefits are described. A few of them being reducing the anxiety, increasing the self-confidence, improving your own relationships, regaining emotional balance, increasing assertiveness, saying no when you mean no, saying yes when you mean yes, some amount of stress relief, ability to set boundaries, and trauma resolution. Now, just observe that in this slide, we have never mentioned that I will solve problems for the client. You need to understand that over the period of counseling, all these things, when they are happening side by side, In the end, the result of counseling will automatically come through. So you do not need to aim for the result, rather aim at the process. The journey, if it is going on the right way, will be both enjoyable and definitely will reach where it is supposed to reach at the end of the sessions. As I told you, when you're sitting across the table, you need to formulate these few things with the client. One is help the client articulate, matlab help the client tell what the problem is or understand his or her problem. A lot of times they would be thinking the problem is different, but actually the problem will be somewhere else. To give you a very small example, take the example of a housewife who has come to you saying that her anger management issues are very high, that her children, whenever they make little bit of noise or they do not obey her unconditionally, she gets so upset that she hits them, beats them. She knows that it is illogical, but she's not able to control her anger. Now, just giving her anger management might not solve the problem. Understanding the client a little bit, you go on to understand that she comes from a moderately literate background. Her husband has been domestically abusing her over many years. She's working outside as well as working at home, so the pressures or responsibilities are doubled. Her work is going through a period of stress. At home, her husband is emotionally not supportive, and recently she has lost a parent. Now, when you think of the client, you know that there is a completely different angle to her anger. She's not angry because she has no management skills of anger, but she's angry because there are n number of issues which are pressing on her time and energy. And when this energy is completely depleted and the children make noise, the only way left to make them comfortable or make them quiet is to scold them or hit them. So you now understand that making her solve her anger is not the issue. You need to make her understand her stress, make some concessions as to how her stress is relieved, some amount of environmental manipulation, teaching her how to handle her husband better, how to handle her work better, and automatically the anger comes down. So this is what I mean by articulating the problem. The problem may be somewhere else. The client is understanding that the problem is somewhere else. You need to change that and make them understand where the problem actually is and what it is. Secondly, forming goals, which I've already spoken about. Understand or tell the client that trust and confidentiality you will keep at the optimum best, because a lot of times we assume that the client knows, but they do not know. They're always confused. This happens when somebody else has brought them for counseling. So always they are in confusion that what if the counselor talks about my problem to my mother, to my sister, to my husband. So at the beginning of every counseling session, assure the client that what he or she says will be kept within these four walls only unless what he says is damaging to his life or somebody else's life. Say a client comes and tells you, I have decided that I need to commit suicide today night, then you do not need to be concerned with confidentiality. You definitely need to tell the relative or the significant other who has come with the person. But if say anything else is revealed, then confidentiality is very, very important and you need to maintain it. Also explore the past and the present. I've already given you an example for that. Just don't go on what the client says. Find out where the client come from, what is his mindset, what he has understood. So after understanding all that only, try and solve the problem. Make a wide at least diagnosis. You may not be very proficient in psychiatric diagnosis, but at least you should know that this client is depressed, this client is anxious, this client is having adjustment problems, this client is phobic. These many diagnoses which we will be teaching you over the course of 1 year, you will have to know, so that you know what counseling theories and what counseling practices can be used for that particular illness. You need to allow for catharsis. Catharsis means telling whatever is in your subconscious as well as conscious without being scared that you will be judged. So right from the heart, as we tell it, that is catharsis. So you need to allow the client to talk about his problems for 1 or 2 sessions. Otherwise, as soon as he says, I'm having issues with anger, oh, then I'll tell you how to manage your anger. This won't do. Listen to him, let him explain about his anger, listen unconditionally, and only then you start your counseling. You need to reinforce positive behavior also. A lot of times when people come to you, they are filled with problems. So at the end of counseling session, maybe within a session or two, your counseling may not end. It might go on for 5, 6, 7 sessions. At the end of every session, make sure the client goes out of the counseling room feeling a little bit comforted. You can't leave problems in the lurch. Okay, my 40 minutes is up. So even if you're crying, just get up and get out of the counseling room. No. You need to make the client a little comfortable. Make him understand that, okay, this will continue for the next time. But for now, you have made good enough progress. So give him some amount of positive feedback. reinforces positive behavior, and then send him back, so that next week till he comes back to you for counseling, his life passes a little smoothly. You have to do a lot of other things like encourage them to take their own responsibilities, narrow down alternatives. They may have n number of options to take, so let them narrow down these, facilitating independence and giving some amount of feedback that yes, you go and try this out, let's see if you can do it independently, if not we will suggest something else. And finally, at the end of where the client should reach, if he has done so, then learn to end the sessions also that smoothly. So all these things will be taught to you again in contact classes. Therefore, I have not explained each one in detail. But for your understanding, you need to know that the previous and this slide, what I've shown you, is what happens through the process of counseling. There are different types of counseling: individual, group, and family. I think the names by themselves are self-explanatory. Individual counseling is one-to-one. Group counseling happens when there is alcoholic anonymous groups or lot of people with the same kind of problem, and you talk to 10 to 12 people at the same time. Family counseling, as in counseling husband, wife, children, extended family, 3 generations or 4 generations together. These are different types of counseling that will occur. Now, the common problem areas where the clients will come to you are emotional problems, hostility, fear, anger, jealousy, adjustment problems, interpersonal problems, career problems, educational, social, and sexual. So, each one of these problems have many, many subheadings under them, which again will be taught to you during the contact classes. These are a few names which I've given here on which counseling theories are based. Each one of them is explained in your self-instruction material, but you may need to be familiar with these names by the time you come for your contact classes. So basically, psychoanalytic is psychodynamic, Adlerian person-centered gestalt behavior modification, REBT and CBT, transactional analysis. There are multiple counseling theories which have been developed. So once you learn your counseling basics, you need to understand that you need to be very, very proficient in at least 1, 2, or 3 of these theories, based on which maximum amount of your counseling will go. So you can pick, you can mix, and then you can start your counseling process. Now, where all will you be doing counseling? Counseling can be done in clinical setups, in educational institutions, in medical setups, organizations like as in HR, recruitment, everywhere. Correctional facilities like juvenile justice homes, remand homes, prisons, everywhere. Family courts, as in when divorce cases appear, counseling needs to be done as a part of the divorce proceedings. In the community, as lay counselors, as ASHA workers, as probably as you're seeing now in today's world where COVID is very rampant, people are going from house to house, teaching people about what COVID is and how they should manage their lives, handling telephone counseling lines, handling suicide counseling lines, talking to children because their exams have got postponed. So these are all community areas where you can spread your counseling work. And in psychosocial rehabilitation centers, where these patients would need a lot of supportive therapy to get out of their problems. So counseling has a wide variety of scope, and you can literally work in any field, and counseling would be necessary there. There are a few other words which you should know, which you are not. You are counselors, but you're not psychotherapists, you're not guidance counselors, you're not clinical psychologists, you're not psychiatrists or social workers. So you need to know the difference between you and these people who will be working in close coordination with you. One, clinical psychologists, these are people who have done their BSc and MSc in psychology with a specialization in clinical. So they will be handling patients who are mentally ill, not people in the community, not people who are normal, though they are trained also for that. Psychiatrists are people who have a medical degree, who have done their MBBS, followed by a post-graduation, either master's or diploma in the field of psychiatry. Now, the difference between counselors, clinical psychologists, and psychiatrists is that a psychiatrist is qualified to medicate the person. Number two, has also a fair enough knowledge of psychotherapy as well as counseling. Social workers are people who have done their bachelor's and master's in social work with a specialization in medical and psychiatric counseling. So these are the people whom you will be seeing or working in liaison with once you finish the course. You need to know the difference between them and you. Okay. Just hold on for a second because the slide is not getting shared. I will share it again. Yeah. Yeah. So as I was talking to you, where do you fit in? You will fit in all these places: schools, industries, hospitals, HR managers, in NGOs, tele helplines, and many more. So counseling is a field which is very much in need today. Before I end, I would like to tell you a little bit about the statistics of people who are helping in the mental health profession right now. The people in the population in India, as all of you know, is somewhere close to 1.3 billion, of which close to about 35 to 40 million people are in need of acute mental health care. Now, as soon as we think of mental health, we think of people who are mentally ill, probably people whom we think of as having some abnormality in behavior, abnormality in thinking, abnormality in working, etc. Remember that people with such illnesses, wherein the illness is very, very obvious and would need some kind of medical help, are close to only 2 to 4% of the population. Major mental illnesses, as we call them, are prevalent in only 2 to 4% of the population. The rest of the 30 million or so people who are there suffer from things which are called as common mental illnesses. These are mild depressions, mild anxieties, adjustment problems, sexual issues, learning difficulties, academic issues, handling behavioral issues. All these constitute to minor mental illnesses. Now, these are people who have these illnesses in a very small form from their childhood or in their adolescence or early adulthood. But because these problems are not solved for a long duration, or the problems are very, very high, then they convert into a mental illness. So there are a huge group of people who are what we call as pre-morbidly mentally ill. They are not mentally ill right now, but the chances that they will become mentally ill are very high because they are not getting the help and support that they need. So these are the people whom you are supposed to go in for counseling. So if you can help out these people, now you know that there are about 30 million people who need help. Now to help this 30 million group, there are in essence in India somewhere around 4 to 5,000 psychiatrists, about 4,000 to 4,000 odd clinical psychologists, about 3,000 odd psychiatric social workers, and a registry of counselors has never been maintained in India. So you realize that for an ideal patient and professional ratio, there should be somewhere close to 1 is to 1,000. In India, even in the bigger cities, we are going close to 1 is to 100,000. So one professional per 100,000 patients. And all these professionals are not medically trained professionals either. So therefore, as counselors, you have to act as an emotional first aid to a huge group of population who do not have any help. Physical health, we have moved quite far ahead. There are hospitals and PHCs at every small village also. But for help regarding mental health issues, for stressors, for adjustment issues, there are not many people who are trained and who can sensibly handle these problems. This is the place where you come into the picture. And that is the reason why we feel that it is essential to train you formally into the field of counseling. Because more than what you say, how you say it, and what you say becomes very, very important to this client's life. Every word that comes out of your mouth needs to be measured, needs to be thought about 100 times, and only then talked to. The reason being that their mental health and sometimes even their life depends on what you're saying. So this is the area where you will be working, and your work profile is very wide. Therefore, through the course of this 1 year, make sure that you learn the concepts really well. Make sure that you do in-depth reading apart from the self-instruction material that we have given you, and make sure that that goal, which I mentioned to at the beginning of the session, why is it that you've taken up counseling, is always thought about every day of your working life. Every day you have to renew your vows to yourself that when you think you need to help the other person, you should be at your optimum skill best. You need to know what to talk, how to talk, where to talk it out. And so that a lot of the population, a lot of people who are suffering internally and not getting any relief for their suffering are helped through your work. So this is the idea why we set up this counseling course, and we are very grateful and thankful that so many of you have decided that it is worthwhile taking up on yourself and helping so many other people in turn. So welcome back to the course again. Congratulations on making the right choice, and make sure you use what you learn to its optimal benefit, and make sure that you make a difference to the world as you have thought already. Thanks so much for a patient hearing, and we will be seeing more of you in the next few days to come. Thank you.